Hello, this is Kyla from Hidden Gems Literary Emporium, here today from Michigan, I'm assuming, right?
I'm actually in Florida right now,
You're in
but
Florida? Oh, stop. I see, this is what happens when you assume. Um, Scott Devon, the author of the Michigan Dogman, all the way from Florida. Thank you for joining us today.
thanks for letting me be here.
So you're a Floridian and you were inspired to write about Michigan and the Michigan Dogman. Why is that? And how did this come about?
Well, actually, I'm just temporary here in Florida. I'm a Michigander, as they call us.
Okay.
And I was born in Detroit and raised mostly in Grand Rapids, and spent most of my life up in northern Michigan as well, which is a familiar territory in the book. So I hope it doesn't get overly discovered because it's pristine and beautiful. And we don't want too many people to find our hidden gem up there too, but we still enjoy it.
Right.
Even though it's cold. That's why I'm here. It's too cold now.
Yes, I was about to say it's getting colder in New Jersey, but in Michigan, I mean, as we can all see by the cover, it gets quite cold. But this is actually probably looks like the cave where the Dogman lives, right?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. He's in an ice cave up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, which they do actually have ice caves up there in the winter. So the Dogman hibernates during the winter and sleeps like a bear, and comes out in the spring. So that's his home.
Tell us a little bit, give us a brief summary of this book, which is written in a really unique way, and why you decided to put a story out of this nature.
Well, it's kind of an interesting story. I actually had a cabin up in northern Michigan, and I had a neighbor up there that ran the local sporting goods store. It was just a small store and stuff, but he was there year round. And I came up the next spring, and he had this picture on the beach. It's by Sleeping Bear Bay up there, and it's far in the distance, but he swore it was the Dogman. And so, of course I'm skeptical, and I'm like, I'm trying to zoom in on it, and you really can't see the figure. It did look like, someone of a large figure on the beach, like way in the distance in the snow and all, but it was like a UFO. You couldn't really tell if it was real or not. So, but it did spark my imagination, and there is obviously the local legend like Bigfoot up in northern Michigan called the Dogman. And so I did a lot of research on other people that have written about it, and the Dogman himself. And there's like T-shirts up there with the Dogman on it, and my little town up there. And so I have to give my neighbor props for taking the picture, and he was 100% convinced that was the Dogman. So that's where it all started.
That's interesting. And so why did you decide to write this book in the perspective of the Dogman? And for those of you who don't know, this is actually, well, it says on the cover, a diary of the Dogman. So why did you decide to write it from that perspective?
Yeah, I think it's a lot more interesting to get in the narrative mind of the protagonist in my book, the Dogman. And I think that's one of the better things I did with the book. But I'm actually writing it's kind of, I have a silly sense of humor, but I'm actually writing about a serial killer right now. So I'm writing from that perspective. So it was good to read a little bit of the Dogman today to prep my interview, because I've had to go into a dark place in my other book, which I normally don't like to dwell on. But yeah, telling it from the first person is kind of things I like to do. And I like the autobiographical aspect of the diary. And it just gives an intimacy to the character that I think some books from third persons don't get to.
I would definitely agree with that. And it was, we were talking before we started recording about what type of creature person the Dogman is, and you were explaining that the Dogman is half man and half dog. and there is a mystery behind who he really is, where he came from. And the cool thing about this book is that the entire time the reader is kind of thinking, well, okay, this creature is ostracized from society. We were talking about, and you talk about in the book, how it's because of the way that he looks that he can't go into society. Yet, the way his journal is written, he seems to be very smart and very articulate. He talks about his emotions. And so it's just an interesting type of character. And it's even more interesting that where you're from, this is a creature that people believe to be real and even maybe have seen in their life, right?
Correct. Yeah, there's been spotting since the 1800s of the dogman in Michigan, and there's actually a pattern of every 7 years that somebody has an encounter with the dogman. So it's a local legend up in Michigan that we enjoy and have fun with too. So, and I'm not here to say if he's real or not. That's up to the reader.
Yeah, and another thing about this character that I thought was really interesting, and I don't want to talk too much about this because it was kind of surprising to me. Towards the end, the reader can see how his crafts develop and how, in a way, he not even in a way, he contributes his talents to society without society knowing who he is. So even though he makes certain relationships with people in society, he's still afraid to come out, if you will, and reveal his identity.
Correct. Yeah, he's really a contrast and juxtaposition of, this visually monster on the exterior, but a sweet poet in the inside of his soul. So, and again, I think a lot of us can relate to that, whether sometimes we all feel lonely or not socially accepted, and for reasons that, unless people get to know you, they never discover. So I made a point of making the dogman that type of creature that is also has this humanity that's flawed, as we all are, and but he really desperately seeks a connection, and I think we all do, and he finds it with his mentor, the professor Jamesman, and takes a risk, which we all have to kind of go out of our comfort zone and risk actually his anonymity and being discovered and maybe captured and put in a cage and poked and prodded and interviewed. And but he took that risk, and obviously with the right person, the professor who guides him and introduces him to some of the finer things of humanity in the arts and movies and books. And so I think it's a pretty sweet friendship that they develop, and I relate to that a lot because growing up, I've had a lot of mentors and coaches and teachers that I drew from that I developed with the Professor Jamesman.
Yeah, and I also liked that part of the book because the dogman in his journals writes about his. It seems as though as time goes on, he feels more and more and more of a need to reach out to people, but especially for some reason, he's connected to this one professor, and he feels like, okay, this person is not going to capture me, not going to, and I don't know what it is exactly that makes him feel like this person specifically is not going to hurt him, but he takes a risk and goes for it. And it's funny because as you were talking, I was flipping through to find something to read from. And then so I flipped over to chapter 19, which exactly talks about what you were talking about right now. And so I said, okay, well, he just said that. Let me find something else. And then I flipped open to chapter 42, which the first page, which again, he talks about the same thing. But I just want to read a couple sentences. And for those who will be watching this video, I'm on page 97, the first page of chapter 42. And so the Dogman writes, I am hoping to one day assimilate and fit into society and not have my beastly appearance scare off potential friends and enemies. I begin to wake after my sleepiness of hibernation with the fear that the professor. I stopped because it was a spoiler and I didn't.
Yeah, that's true. Good catch.
Yeah, okay. But anyway, the point was, and by the way, when we found that out too, about the professor, we weren't expecting that to happen.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Yeah, I think one thing you mentioned a little earlier that I'd like to comment on is the Dogman chose the professor basically on the music. So, yes. And I went back to the music calming the savage beast kind of thing, and the professor is at University of Michigan a professor of music and an accomplished pianist. So the Dogman basically spies on the professor in his remote cabin on Lake Superior and listens to the beautiful music that the professor plays. And that's what gave him the comfort of knowing that he could relate to the professor on a art inspired basis of mutual love of music.
Thank you. Yes, I do remember that. And when we were reading that part, here at the bookstore, we always say books, art, and music are the three universal love languages amongst everyone and anyone. And even, that shows in your book. The Dogman and the professor, they bonded really over music, art, and books. And you talk about how the Dogman was an avid reader. That's how he found out about things happening in the world. He would read newspapers and just get access to different type of literature and stay updated on what's going on in society, even more so after he met the professor and gets technology and things like that. So
and an interesting point, if I could add on that too, is the without the technological advancements of the computer and that the professor gives gifts to the Dogman, the special part was he could retain his anonymity and still be connected. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about the World Wide Web and that we can connect from our laptops to people across the world, but it was a way for the Dogman to do that without taking the risk of exposing his I would say his monster image. And so he was able to come across the people just with his art, not with his physical being.
Right. And we were speaking about, and even in that one sentence that I just read before we started recording, we were talking about how appearances, how people will judge you based off of your appearance, not knowing what type of intelligence or skills that you may have. And so that seems like that was another theme that you portrayed in this book through this character.
Yes, he's, again, if anybody would come across a Bigfoot or a Dogman, your first instinct is this beast is going to kill me. and they might, it's like maybe coming across a dog that sometimes you don't know if they're friend or foe, and until they smell you and make sure you're not their enemy and going to hurt them. So I pulled out some of that, and I'm a big animal lover, and I have horses and dogs and all my life, and I've always been around animals. So being able to kind of understand which I do believe animals have souls, it really inspired me to write this book as well, from the dog perspective of the hybrid canine and man.
Very interesting. What is next for you as an author? Well, I have two questions. One is, what do you want the main takeaway for readers to be after they read this book? And then the second question is, what is next for you as an author?
Sure. Yeah, I would hope that, well, actually, I've had a couple experiences already that I could share. I have my mom gifted the book to a friend of ours that had been through a lot and lost his wife, and has a young son that's about 11 years old. And the boy picked up my book and finished it from start to finish. Went up to his room and read the entire book. And I haven't spoken with him yet, but I guess he was very, very moved by the book. And so if I just do that one time, I'm good, so, but if that catches on with other people and they can relate to it and find something life fulfilling or let's say inspiring behind the book, then I've done my work, and I'm pleased with that. But it's, again, it's like the dog man in us that, you want that connection, and I hope to get that through my writing.
We always.
And what's next?
Yes, what's next, please?
Yeah, what's next? I'm 3/4 of the way through my first draft. It's called Mother, and it's about a serial killer. And he was abused by his mother that raised him, and he ends up killing her as a teen and goes to juvie. And it's not as dark as it sounds, because there's some redemption as he goes through life. And it's sort of like we don't pick our circumstance, but it's what we do with our circumstance. And that's what that kind of book's about. So I'm at kind of towards the critical point where he's not a perfect person, as no one is, but he's definitely been dealt a bad hand, and he's overcoming that. And a lot of times I've read and studied, which was pretty interesting about serial killers, that they never have redemption, or they never overcome what they have done. And maybe it's my spiritual background, but I do believe in redemption. And so this story is about that even the worst of us can be put on a better path and have some redeeming qualities of their life. And but sometimes they don't. But in this book, I hope it has a happier ending, but I haven't got there yet.
And so, and I also like to ask authors this question: your thought process when you're writing, do you just go and flow and write, or do you say, okay, this is the outline, this is how it's going to start, beginning, middle, end, and then you fill it in?
Yeah, it's interesting. Good question. When I first started writing, I would have an outline that was pretty had boundaries and specifics, and beat points that I'd try to hit and follow the formulas and things. And I quickly found out that didn't work well for me. I have to start with a concept where I think it is, and then the story just tells me what it wants to be. So, and it is, sometimes I have to pause and take a few days and just say, what does this person or character want to do next or say next? And so it's not really a rush process, but it's interesting because it's more listening than writing a lot of times. And so I find that pretty fun how it starts off one way on a premise and surprises me how it ends sometimes, or how it develops. So I guess if it surprises me, it might surprise the reader. So I'm happy with that.
Yeah, and let it go and let it flow stories, typically they come out better than stories that are more formulated, if you will.
Correct. Yeah. And I'm pretty quick writer on the first draft, but then the painful part begins of the rewrites and the edits and that's a laborious task that I'm sure is shared by all writers. But the first draft's pretty much bliss all the way through, and then I realized I've got a lot of work to do. I just started. So.
Right. But one more thing I want to mention based off what you said about your experience where you gave your book to a child and they read it. We tell people all the time, especially inspiring authors, that once you write something, and not any type of art form, literary art, music, once you produce something, it now becomes a part of history. So let's talk about books, for example. A lot of us who really love books, we keep books for generations to come. So all of the books that we are reading and reviewing from our independent authors back here, anywhere, they are a part of our history of the foundation of our bookstore. And so our son will be probably reading these books and looking at what we underlined in here and took notes on. And once you produce something, it becomes a part of history. People will forever be able to look up this book and get a copy of it. So that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, well, thank you for that opportunity of having my book in your store. It sounds like a great store. I'd love to visit someday, and if I'm in the areas. Please
do. There's a lot to do in New Brunswick. And so, but I wouldn't want to pull you away from that weather. So maybe spring. And
well, maybe in the summer.
Yeah, or in the summer, so you could get a good impression of New Jersey.
Sure.
But I want to thank you today so much for your time. Thank you for, telling us more about the book, The Michigan Dogman, a Diary, which is on display here at Hidden Gems Literary Emporium. Anybody who's watching this video can come by. We're at 55B Morris Street. You can come by and get your copy, or you can give us a call and we will ship a copy to your home. Where can people get in touch with you if they have any questions or want to learn more about you or the book?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Scott Devon, D-E-V-O-N, and I believe my author page is up. I should have that right now, but I don't have that. But if you Google I think there's a way to connect with me on that, or my Facebook page is also available. And if anybody wants signed copies or little notes about the Dogman, I'll be happy to do that for them. And I love to hear feedback as well. So if any of your readers want to contact me and see how the book, how they liked it or disliked it, I'm open to that, and look forward to hopefully seeing the Dogman in real life someday.
Or even on the big screen.
There you go. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you again so much for your time. And I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day. And again, I just want to encourage everyone who's going to be watching this video, come by Hidden Gems Literary Emporium and get your copy of The Michigan Dogman by Scott Devon. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you again for your time and opportunity and your wonderful store to have my book in your store. It means a lot.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.